Hey, good morning, all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Thursday morning to you. We are going to be talking tropics again in this video and the continued threat for a very quickly strengthening Hurricane Lee here in the central Atlantic. Also going to talk about the next system and maybe one behind it in the Atlantic. Margot and Nigel are the next two names. And in the Pacific, many people did not see it coming, at least not as strong as it is, but Hurricane Hova is now a Category 5 storm, fortunately not impacting land, but I'm going to just show that to you because I think it's just incredible to see how quickly this time of the year storms can intensify. So I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. I've been on YouTube since December of last year, although previously had some YouTube experience helping my friends over at Carolina Weather Authority, and I've been a meteorologist for 20 years. So what I'm sharing with you is understand my knowledge and my 20 years plus of experience in this field. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, the latest forecast on Hurricane Lee. Let me get myself out of the way here. And I'm continuing to project that this storm will rapidly intensify over the next 48 to 72 hours into a Category 5 hurricane, our first of the season, and possibly our strongest since Hurricane Dorian back in 2019, which slammed into the northwestern Bahamas. That is likely going to happen to the north of Puerto Rico and the northern Leeward and Virgin Islands here by this weekend. Now, after that, the storm is expected to slow down and gradually make a turn to the right. And there's still some uncertainty on how that turn is going to play out. And we are not going to really have a great view on what that's going to even look like until we get to maybe next Monday, Tuesday, or even Wednesday. I've circled Bermuda because Bermuda is in the cone at this point, although overall most of the models go to the west of you in Bermuda. Not every single one does, but most do. But as the storm makes that turn, it is likely to track parallel to the East Coast. And several models show this becoming a threat to New England and Canada towards next weekend. You see, I've got the icon here. Category 1 at that point, it'll be in cooler water, but you can see I've got Eastern Massachusetts, Maine, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia all under that one. Which one will it hit? My answer is yes. I don't quite know. That is 10 days away, so there will still be some fluctuations here in this forecast. And there is a chance that this could still make us all surprised and come on the eastern or western side of this track. Could go over Bermuda and miss most of Atlantic Canada completely. And there's also a chance that it could stay on more of a west-northwesterly track and make that turn later, making a lot of us here on the East Coast more uncomfortable. So I can't rule that chance out just yet. It is still 8 to 10 days away. So if you are watching me anywhere from Cape Hatteras on up the coast, you definitely need to be at least tracking this a little bit more closely and not dismissing it as a threat. I don't think it's going to be a problem for Florida or the Southeast at this point. The steering currents do not dictate that. In the Bahamas, we should probably still keep an eye on it until it makes that turn. And the important point I want to make is that things are coming in a little bit slower here during the first half of next week as the high pressure ridge starts to break down and the steering currents do weaken some. And that, of course, is never anything you really want to see because a slower moving storm means a more uncertain storm. But I do think it will accelerate eventually and make that right turn. Just the big question mark is it going to be over here just east of the Bahamas or will it be near Bermuda? And there's about a 500-mile difference in that zone there. So a lot can still change. But right now, the model consensus has it coming up into Atlantic Canada and possibly into eastern New England as well. So you see on the map, here's Hurricane Lee. We've got another system which I believe will be a tropical depression by tomorrow or at the very latest Saturday morning, maybe a tropical storm. And the next name on the list would be Margot. That system is actually very close to the Cabo Verdes, the Cape Verde Islands off the African coast in some pretty warm water. And the fortunate thing about this system is that it will be making that turn faster. So it will be a fish storm and should not impact any major land masses. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's another wave behind it we do need to keep an eye on, but right now, not in the next 7 days would it become any kind of tropical system. And the remains of Franklin, which has been around for what, 3 weeks now, came through Hispaniola, then came west of Bermuda. It is still kind of looping around out there in the far northeast Atlantic into some warmer waters. I don't think it's going to re-intensify into a tropical storm, but it may produce some tropical storm force winds off the coast of Portugal and well to the northeast here of the Azores Islands. But again, just a yellow circle at this point. Here's a wide view from Zoom Earth, and you can see our storms that are on the map. Hurricane Lee here, which is not even the biggest one that we're tracking. Hurricane Jova, now a Category 5 storm. That just formed 2 days ago. It's already up to 160 stinking miles per hour. Just incredible to see that. But the great news about Hova is that it does not look like any sort of land masses would be impacted, staying well southwest of Mexico. We do, believe it or not, still have Idalia on the map. It's not tropical, but it's still got a circulation passing by to the eastern parts of Nova Scotia towards Newfoundland, but it is not likely to re-intensify at this point, just a extratropical or non-tropical low pressure system. And then we've got Invest 96L, which will likely be our next storm here in the next couple of days, expected to turn in this direction. And you can see we have the remains of what was Tropical Storm Katia, just a circulation at this point. And another wave predicted to move off the coast here early next week, and that will be something we have to keep an eye on. And oh, by the way, this is the remains of Franklin over here. You see this circulation northwest of Portugal, southwest of Ireland. It's actually tracking slowly southeast, not expected to become anything tropical. And then finally in the Western Pacific, just one named storm, and it's not a strong one, Tropical Storm Yunying, and that is going to be making landfall in Japan tonight as a tropical storm, bringing some heavier rains to places like Tokyo and tracking near Nagano as well, and weakening, of course, over these mountains northwest of Tokyo. Another system we're going to keep an eye on near Guam has a very low chance of developing, just some tropical rains expected there. But really, the two systems on the map that you even need to be looking at right now are Lee and Hova, the two major hurricanes by tomorrow, I believe. Here's a look at the wide view of the tropics. I love looking at maps like this, just really cool here. But you can see the Gulf is pretty much cloudless, which is great. Western Atlantic, pretty quiet for the most part. Caribbean, very quiet. Just a flare up here with the monsoon over southern Central America and Colombia. Eastern Atlantic is where all the action is at this point, which is great for us right now. However, doesn't look like it's going to quite stay that way. This is growing Hurricane Lee, a Category 1 storm. And then here's our next disturbance passing over the Cabo Verdes. This will likely be Margot, which has a potential to be a hurricane down the pipe here. Here's the remains of Katia, just a remnant low-level circulation with no thunderstorms. Here's an upper-level low, which is not going to develop, I don't think anyway. And that will be influencing the remains of Katia. And then let me get this off the map here so I can move it. Whoops, sorry about that. Drawn like a kindergartner. I have a kindergartner. She's actually really good. And then we see the low-level circulation left over from Idalia over here, spinning near Sable Island. And that is starting to make the right turn, so it does not look like it's going to slam directly into Nova Scotia, which is good, because if you're in Nova Scotia, you're probably on edge at this point about what is to come. Here's a look at the wide view of the infrared from tropicaltidbits.com. If you get a chance and want to see something even more technical, make sure that you're watching Dr. Levi Cowan's videos. I try to watch them as much as I can. I never try to emulate him, but it helps me understand what's going on kind of more on the research side of things here in the tropics. But you can see the big circulations on the map, nothing threatening land at this point. Here's a look at Hurricane Lee, Category 1 storm. Here's our next system flaring up nicely. I think it'll be a depression and then tropical storm. Margot, we've got another wave here getting ready to come off of Africa. Upper level low here. Remains of Katia here. Remains of Franklin over here, not showing any real tropical characteristics. And the remains of Idalia over here. And then just off the map over there is Hurricane Category 5, Hurricane Jova. So very busy, as you would expect here at the beginning of September, despite the El Nino that we're in. Here's a look at the Western Atlantic. And again, really the only thing to be concerned with, aside from this approaching front, is the remains of Idalia tracking near Sable Island and turning away to the north and east. This front could produce some severe weather as the day wears on. I'm going to get to that at the end of the video real quick. Looking at the Central Atlantic, the only system on the map to watch at this point is Hurricane Lee, and it's in a very favorable spot to intensify, moving into very warm ocean waters and very low wind shear here in the next few days. And then back at the Eastern Atlantic, the remains of Katia over here. Let me get my graphic back out for you guys here. Remains of Katia, really nothing at this point. Next system flaring up nicely. I think it's got a good shot at becoming a tropical storm here before the weekend. That would be Margot. Then another wave to keep an eye on down the pipe here, and one after that. One of these two could develop, and I'll show you some models in the longer term that do show that happening, but it's going to be some time before that does happen. Let's take a look at Hurricane Lee, Category 1 storm, but beginning to show that it is going to strengthen and perhaps strengthen very rapidly here in the next 48 hours. Much like we saw with Hova, I think this one becomes a Category 5. It takes maybe a little bit longer to strengthen, but it strengthens and looks like it's poised to do some damage here over the open waters. Here's a look at the visible satellite. Right now, tough to see a clear eye, but very easy to see that thunderstorms are in fact blowing up on both sides here of the eye wall. And this indicates a storm that is likely to very quickly strengthen. If you take a look here at the geostationary lightning mapper, you can see there are certainly lightning strikes starting to pop up near the center. And more importantly, we've got outflow in all channels here on all sides of the storm, meaning it is growing and will be continuing to grow here. This is a microwave satellite image taken earlier showing a mid-level eye is now forming. Unfortunately, the microwave only took the western half of the picture, but you can see this eye wall feature here with some darkening colors here on the southwest side of it. This means we are going to see an eye forming, and this is at the mid-levels, but likely at the surface we'll see that as well, and that should allow this system to start clearing out and forming a pretty well-defined and maybe a growing-sized eye here, which allows pressures to drop pretty quickly. When the pressures drop quickly, then the winds speed up and grow significantly, and we have a rapidly maturing cyclone. Here's a look at the official forecast. This is Tomer Berg's website, but you can see it's predicted in 12 hours to be a Category 2, 100-mile-per-hour hurricane, and then this time tomorrow morning, a Category 3. This time on Saturday, a high-end Category 5, maybe getting close to Category 4, maybe close to Category 5. The official forecast has been bumped up to 155 miles per hour, which is just shy of Category 5. If you look at the high amount of oceanic heat content here, that's these hashed lines. You look at the low wind shear, in my opinion, this forecast is still going to need to be nudged upward some. And we could see winds that get easily over 165 miles per hour, maybe 180 before all is said and done, if it continues to intensify. And overall, forecast models, while they show this intensification, they tend to still be a little bit underdone in situations like this. We saw that very clearly with Hurricane Jova in the Pacific. As you can see, the threat for tropical storm force winds is very high here across this zone. We still see a chance, though, on the southern part of our system that there could be tropical storm force winds. It's about a 5 to 10% chance over Puerto Rico and a 10 to 20% chance over the Virgin Islands. And the far northern islands like St. Martin actually have a 20% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. If this track shifts even just a little bit to the left, those chances for tropical storm force winds grow, and we likely have a tropical storm watch and then warning issued here for some of these northern islands. I don't think you get a direct hit at this point based on what the models are showing, but the system will be growing, and the faster it grows, the faster it intensifies, the more likely we at least get some fringe effects and some tropical storm force winds. The chance, though, for stronger tropical storm force winds looks like it stays north of those islands, but again, any slight shift to the left of this here next week brings that possibility of 58-mile-per-hour winds onto places like St. Martin. So I think worst case scenario, we do have a tropical storm watch that gets posted for some of these islands here, maybe as soon as tomorrow night or Saturday morning. But I think the worst looks like it remains off to your north and west. Here's a look at the hurricane force wind probability. And I think these numbers are going to go up here, but you can see, fortunately, it does stay well north and east of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the northern Leeward Islands. And at this point, in the next 5 days, stays to the east of the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. That could change, though, further out in time. Forecast models are in pretty good agreement, but you kind of see there's two different camps of tracks. One which turns the system a little bit more to the right before it bend back to the left a little bit, and then one that keeps it pretty much west-northwest the entire time. Fortunately, both of these tracks remain well to the north of the islands, but obviously we're going to be watching to see which one of these tracks works out. But this is still pretty good agreement at 72 hours. There's only about a 100-mile spread. We like to see that. Obviously, when you get farther off into the future, we have two things going on. Number one, we have our storm slowing down north of Puerto Rico. And number two, we have some change in the upper level pattern that will allow a turn to the right. However, the HAFS models don't go that far out, and they don't show the turn happening just yet. So a later turn, obviously, would be more of a concern for those of us here on the East Coast. A shorter or an earlier turn would be more of a concern for Bermuda and less of a concern for the East Coast. Ensemble members, here are the means, and they're all in pretty good agreement at this point, some fluctuation, of course, but you can see over time the overall track has shifted a bit to the right over the weekend and then back a little bit more to the left by the middle of next week, meaning that our turn happens sooner. Then there's a bend back for a time being, and then a later turn after that. You can see Bermuda over here is going to be on the right side of this more than likely. Excuse me, here's the GEFS, the ensemble forecast system from the GFS, and still a pretty good amount of spread. But for the most part, aside from a couple of members here, everything makes that right turn. But the question mark is, does that happen here west of 70 west, or does it happen near 65 west? Near 65 west, then we've got to be concerned in Bermuda. Near 70 west, we need to be more concerned in New England. Overall, though, the ensemble members make this right turn. I'll show you in a minute, the European is going to be west of the GFS. The two swapped here a few days ago. Here's a look at the European ensemble members, and all of them make this an intense hurricane. In fact, we now have one showing an 893 millibar hurricane, which would be not just Category 5, but strong Category 5, and within the strongest 10 storms on Atlantic hurricane season record. There are still several ensembles that have it in the low 900s, between 900 and 915. That is Category 5. And we have some members that keep it a Category 4. But overall, pretty much every ensemble shows this could be a Category 4 storm, and several show a Category 5, and even one or two show an intense higher end Category 5 hurricane. That maximum strength is going to be somewhere in here, by the way, north of Puerto Rico and over open water. Now we see the ensemble spread is still pretty big, as you might expect with a storm like this, with some of the western ensembles as far west as maybe only 150 miles east of the Bahamas. But they are making the right turn. There are no longer any ensembles from the European taking it west towards Florida, which is what I didn't expect anyway to happen. Now, there are a few that go to the right of Bermuda, and let me circle this for you guys. This is Bermuda right here. So there are a couple of ensemble members that make that hard right near Bermuda, or even make the hard right south and east of Bermuda. But the majority still stay west. This is the mean, and if you take this ensemble mean, it takes it up into eastern Nova Scotia and towards Newfoundland. The control and the operational deterministic model take the storm over western Nova Scotia into the Bay of Fundy and into southeastern New Brunswick, which is a pretty well-populated area. And then there are some ensembles which, believe it or not, make a north turn towards Maine, or even a north-northwesterly bend back towards Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and into the St. Lawrence Valley. So this is a little bit less likely, but possible for it to happen here. This is more likely in here, and most likely in here. Either way, it's 10 to 11 days away, and a lot can change. So anywhere really in this area, we need to be watching at this point. That includes Bermuda, by the way. But fortunately, here, the islands here, they're going to stay to the south of where the worst of the weather is going to be. So let's take a look here at some more information. And this is the ship, this is the ensemble members, and you can see the system will start slowing down here after about 4 days. Between 4 and 7 days from now, it'll be moving slower than it is right now. And you can see because of that, the spread does start growing here. But overall, we're starting to see that bend back to the left as high pressure builds west, and then a weakness in the high pressure turns it and slows it down with more of a northwesterly turn here in about 7 days. Model intensity, again, I don't know what's going on with the UK Met. There's no way it's below tropical storm strength. A couple models say Category 2 or 3, but the majority of them say Category 4, and some say Category 5, which is what I do think happens with this system. You can see the ship's model shows that we've got a 32% chance of rapid intensification over 30 miles per hour, which is 3 times the average. But several of these show rapid intensification probabilities of 75 miles per hour on top of what we have, which is 80 miles per hour. So there's a 16% chance that in the next 3 days, the wind speed goes up by 75 miles per hour to as high as 155 miles per hour. And in about 48 hours or so, there is potential, the highest possibility of this, to get up to 170 knots. That is almost 200 miles per hour of sustained wind, gusts to 230. So that's about the high end on this. Does it get to 200 miles per hour? I think that's very far-fetched due to the fact that wind shear does start to climb. But does it get over 160 knots? Certainly that is possible. And we could see a storm that reaches 180 miles per hour in strength. At the very least, I think it's 160 miles per hour. But there's that window anywhere from 150 to maybe 200 miles per hour where this could go. As we get into next week, the wind shear does go over 15 knots, about 20 miles per hour, and the water temperatures start dropping below 86 down to 84. The relative humidity starts dropping a little bit here from 63 to 58%, and the heat content starts to drop off. So all of those would be a deterrent to intensification. The storm would probably weaken slightly at that point, probably to a category 4 hurricane. If it is a 5, it's not going to stay a 5 forever, maybe only for a couple of days. You can see the warmest ocean waters are going to be in the next couple of days. Then as the storm tracks west of Bermuda, there will be some cooler waters, which should start a weakening phase. There is some strengthening possibility here as it goes over the cool waters and back to warmer waters, but the window for that to happen is very, very, very narrow at this point. And then if it does come up into the Bay of Fundy, those water temperatures cool considerably, but the storm should speed up, not intensify, should speed up. So that may slow down the rate of weakening by the time it comes up into here. And if it hits Nova Scotia or if it hits Eastern Maine, the very worst case, I don't think it's stronger than a Category 2, and more than likely it's a Category 1 hurricane at that juncture. You can see here the warmest waters are in the face of this system, 30, 31 degrees Celsius. It's 86 to 88 Fahrenheit. So a lot of potential fuel for this storm to grow very quickly. And then the other question mark, of course, is not does it grow, because it will, but where does it go? You can see here by the end of the weekend, we've got high pressure building to the north here of Lee. We've got a trough digging into the southeast, and we've got a weakness here that will allow our next system to come up to the north and west. Where this system goes, where Margot goes, could influence how the strength of the ridge builds for Lee. So believe it or not, the system behind it does have some potential play here on it. It does look like it's going to turn away and allow for somewhat of an area of high pressure to build in here. But the question mark is, how quickly does that build? The GFS says it doesn't build very quickly until we get into the second part of next week. But the stronger this area of high pressure ends up being, then the slower this trough here that moves into the east ends up being, and the farther west the system can go. The GFS shows that the ridge is going to push away to the east, and we'll have enough of a window for the system to turn north-northeast away from the U.S. more towards Canada. And oh, by the way, when we've got Lee here, we've got potentially Hurricane Margot here, and then a ridge building south of them, we've got a window for the next wave to develop, by the way, into Nigel. But again, that is more than 10 days away. So we do have to keep an eye on that. The GFS from earlier takes Nigel directly over Bermuda, which is such a small target, but this is 15 days away, and this will likely change. So just something we have to watch in the future at this point. Oh, by the way, after Lee comes up through Atlantic Canada and the ridge builds here, we may have some uncertainty with Margot, and it may be still around here in about 10 to 12 days. So we're going to keep an eye on that for you guys as well. Here's the surface pressure on the GFS. This is the 0Z. The new one's coming in now. I'll show it to you at the end here. And you can see it's got the system deepening to Category 4 strength. It has Margot becoming a hurricane and becoming a Category 3 storm here by the September 11th time frame. That one turns away, but it still lingers. This one we watch as it weakens and begins that right curve. And then behind these two systems, there's enough spacing for yet another hurricane here around the 17th or 18th of September. And that one could follow the path of Lee, by the way. It could be another major hurricane in here if the GFS is right. So European model only goes 10 days out, but it remains to the west of the GFS. And we have to see if that's going to work out or not. But certainly shows a deepening system down to 920 or so millibars, 918 on this frame here on September 11th. And then rising pressure, actually it's got 911 here on the 12th. So it keeps it a deep Category 5 south of Bermuda. It is weaker though with Margot, and it allows less of an influence of Margot on Lee at this point. As we get beyond that, we see the pressure climbing into the 940s as it moves southwest of Bermuda into the 950s over the western Atlantic on the 15th. And then speeding up and moving right up towards the Bay of Fundy or the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia on the 16th. The pressure there, 962. I know it's hard to read, but that would actually be a Category 2 hurricane if that holds, or a very strong one that's slowly weakening. Then you can see here, Margot, it's got blowing up into a Category 3 storm and then taking a loop back to the west as high pressure builds to the east and keeps it away from exiting towards Ireland. So a lot of uncertainty at this point. And the European doesn't say the next system develops just yet, but after the 17th and 18th, there certainly will be a window for that to happen. Here's the European control, and that one goes a little bit farther out. You can see it's got a 907 millibar strong Category 5 here between Puerto Rico and Bermuda. It's got a Category 2 storm here with Margot. This would be on the 12th, and then weakening after that. This is the 15th, and it accelerates and moves into Nova Scotia as a 960 millibar Category 2. It's got Margot strengthening over the northern Atlantic into a Category 3 storm, then looping back. And then after Margot moves away, because it's got Margot pushing back here, it does not have Nigel developing at this point. So the GFS is the only model that shows that happening. So anyway, let's just look at Lee here, and you can see where the swath of strongest winds is going to occur. And you see that turn, and it's got it going west of Bermuda here by a few hundred miles, which is good news. But it's got the storm growing and wind gusts getting all the way up to tropical storm strength across the Outer Banks. Even as the storm moves away 500 miles to the right of the East Coast, we have tropical storm conditions possible over the Outer Banks. Farther to the north, you see that as well here. Here's the winds building, and you can see wind gusts over 40 miles per hour in Hatteras by next Friday. And you can see winds will start picking up on next Saturday to 50 miles per hour on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and 50 miles per hour on Cape Cod. And then we start seeing those winds moving into Maine, the Bay of Fundy, and Nova Scotia. So if the European is right, we do have potentially a very damaging storm system for eastern New England and Atlantic Canada, including all of New Brunswick and all of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, and maybe western Newfoundland as well. These wind speeds in kilometers per hour, for those of you in Canada, just so you can see, on the European, maximum wind gusts could get as high as 100 kilometers per hour by Saturday morning next weekend, the 16th, and then as high as 120 or 130 kilometers per hour in places like Halifax, and 100 kilometers per hour in places like Moncton, and right on the Maine border, 95 kilometers per hour. This would be next Saturday, 120 kilometers per hour over Prince Edward Island, and this area here as the St. Lawrence opens up. So let's look at the HAFS tropical model. We can see how this system is predicted to deepen very quickly. Lee will be down into the 950s by tomorrow night, into the 940s by Saturday morning, into the 930s by Saturday night, 9-teens, which is strong Category 5 by Sunday morning, and even below into the 908, 909 millibar range. That is about the equivalent of 165 or 170 mile per hour strong Category 5 hurricane by Saturday night. We don't have a Category 6 despite what you might see out there, but definitely a Category 5 at this point, around the same strength as Dorian when it hit the northwestern Bahamas. And then you see the pressures still stay very low, Category 5 strength until next Tuesday, as the system goes well to the east of the Turks and Caicos, and then the pressures start climbing on Tuesday as it moves into some cooler water and wind shear starts to begin to increase. Here's our wind speeds on the HAFSB with Lee. You can see by the weekend 147 to 150 miles per hour. By the time we get to Saturday morning, we are at a strong Category 4. By the time we get to Saturday afternoon, we're approaching Category 5 strength. And I think the strongest would be Saturday night, Sunday, and Sunday night when we have the potential for 171 miles per hour maximum sustained winds around the eye wall. So the storm is going to grow and will likely deepen very quickly here over the weekend and continuing until we get to a certain point here where it starts weakening next Monday or Tuesday. But look how big this system gets, by the way. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, that's where we are. The next system, by the way, this is probably Margot, looking like it's going to be a tropical storm here, according to this model here, by tonight or tomorrow morning. That may be a little bit quick, but you can see it will become better organized by the weekend over the eastern Atlantic. And we may see potentially a hurricane by the time we get to next Monday or Tuesday. It's going to be pretty close to that level. You can see here 79 mile per hour winds by next Monday night, but that is not a threat to land at this point. You can see it is growing, very deep thunderstorms, but there may be a little bit of a poorly defined center here. Let's take a look at the visibles so we can take a look at that here. Oops. Sorry, that was the wrong one. You can see very quickly strengthening thunderstorms here, but there may not quite be a well-defined low-level center. If there is, it's just west of the Cabo Verdes. So this system could be approaching tropical storm strength. We just need to see if, in fact, it has a low-level center with it. The good news is that it's going to make a right turn well to the north and east of any kind of land. but it does show intensification, and most models show it being a hurricane by next Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, maybe even a major hurricane. In the Pacific, though, boy, oh boy, is this something here. This is Category 5 Hurricane Hova. You see the pinwheel eye, a very quickly strengthening storm system. It may be leveling off. Here is the infrared, and you can see just an incredible looking storm, which probably has winds around. I mean, they're estimating 160 miles per hour. I wouldn't be shocked if it's already 175 miles per hour. Hurricane Jova, our strongest storm in the Western Hemisphere so far this year. We may see Lee get to that strength here by Monday, but for now, this is our strongest storm. And the good news is that it is no threat to land. It'll make a bit of a bend back to the southwest next week, but may have a little bit more strengthening to go here, but we will start to see weakening back to Category 4 by tomorrow, and by the weekend, Category 3, and then below major hurricane strength after that as it hits cooler waters. But here you can see just that very, very tiny but very powerful eye. And this storm is going to slowly wind itself down back to Category 1 strength over the weekend. This is probably not strong enough in the short term, but it is going to be weakening after that. Real quick, we do have a slight risk for severe weather across parts of the Northeast down into northern Virginia this afternoon, mainly a threat for strong winds, but there could be some hail. Marginal risk all the way down into northern Florida, marginal risk as well in the central states here. Tomorrow, we continue to see some rough weather over the Northeast, a slight risk for severe weather from Baltimore up into Worcester, Mass, and Springfield, Massachusetts, and Western Connecticut. Slight risk in Northeast Texas, where we do finally have a cold front coming down, which is going to bring some needed rain and some cooler temperatures by the weekend. Marginal risk over Montana. And we have marginal risks in the Houston area and southwestern Louisiana, where drought conditions are very significant at this point. And so we will take what we can get. Marginal risk, though, for severe weather, so be prepared for some hail and strong winds in this area on Saturday. High Plains and Rockies do have a marginal risk, as does parts of New England. So we are finally seeing some needed rain in places that certainly need it. The latest GFS models coming in, I just wanted to take a look at that with you all. I don't think it's going to change my forecast, but it is showing our two hurricanes here, Lee and Margot, and this is next Monday night and Tuesday morning. And then as we get to Wednesday, we see the storm had slowed down. It's starting to weaken. Now it's starting to increase its forward speed by Thursday and Friday, passing to the west of Bermuda here. And then as we get to Friday night, accelerating, and the GFS has this system moving by the very eastern tip of Nova Scotia. So the European was coming up into New Brunswick and eastern Maine and southwest Nova Scotia, right to the Bay of Fundy. The GFS remains farther to the east with a more significant curve, but a strong storm. This would be Category 2 strength. And we continue to see what will be a stronger hurricane with Margot, probably a Category 2 or 3 by next weekend. And we are starting to see some development of our next system, which would be Nigel. Not really a big deal up through next weekend. It's after next weekend when this system could develop up in here, kind of in the same place as where Lee developed. So I don't have time to wait for this to come in, but know that the models are not making any major adjustments at this point. I really appreciate y'all's time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. Please also consider becoming a member if you really do want to have more perks, including priority responses, more custom forecasting, and just more interaction. Then we have a tier that only costs $9.99 a month, 33 cents a day. That support helps me to grow my reach. It allows me to make some upgrades to my equipment here, which I plan on doing because this has been a wonderful month here. And I just thank you for your support. I never dreamed I would be this far along in less than a year, but things have dictated it. And I appreciate all of you who trust me on a daily basis. You may trust me, but I'll tell you what, guys, I trust God. I'm called as a Christian person to do what I do. This is my gift to you all, and I couldn't do it without God. I couldn't do it without the sacrifices made and without Jesus Christ. He is the reason for my very existence and being. And I will read a quick passage, Psalm 46, 10 and 11, King James Version. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Now, what is being said here by David in this psalm is not necessarily to be still and do nothing, but it's to humble yourself, to stop believing that you are what you are without God, to understand that God is there. He is our higher power. He is to be exalted, to be raised, and he is with us at all times, that he is our refuge. The God of Jacob is our refuge. He is the very reason that we're here. And he provides to us the strength to continue doing what we're doing. He provides many blessings to us. And most importantly, through Jesus Christ, we have the strength to live eternally with Jesus in the heavenly kingdom, the kingdom of God. All we have to do is stop believing what the world believes and to start believing that there is a God and that he is exalted and that he continues to bless us in many, many ways. I truly believe that. And I want to pray for you, whether or not you truly believe that. And if you're not a believer, you know what? I am not going to judge you because I'm 41 years old. It took me until I was almost 31 to become a Christian. I was not a believer. I was very dark. I was in a spot where I thought I could do it all, but I knew that I was missing something. I just didn't know what it was. And then, I mean, through God's grace, I finally was able to make that change and to lose some stubbornness and to gain some humility and to realize that God is there and that there's a very purpose for what I am doing, that there's a purpose for where I am in life now. And I may have been struggling. I still am struggling with some things, but knowing that God can help me through those struggles. And I'm just here to pray for you or over you if you are struggling and you are or are not a believer, because I feel like that's my calling. It's my gift to you all to not just be a meteorologist, but to be an encourager and to be somebody who's here to share this holy word with you. So I really pray that you have a wonderful day, that you have a blessed weekend. I will have a video for you all in the morning again, and we'll chat again. Please feel free to list any prayer requests. And of course, I'm here to help you out with any forecast questions you may have. Appreciate y'all's support, and I hope you have a blessed day. We'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you.